Hi there, warm welcome. You're watching Blueprint Explosive Exclusive and I'm Meghan Deka. Now viewers, the US elections are over. All eyes are now going to be on who will make it to Donald Trump's cabinet in his second term and what would Trump 2.0 mean for India and Indians. Yes, that's the big question everyone wants an answer for. So amidst the ongoing conflicts and changing global dynamics, Trump's direct and disruptions also approach is something which is likely to impact every country in the world. But for India, there seems to be at least some good news. We are in fact learning that some of the pro-India faces are likely to be prominently inducted in Team Trump. That's right. We have learned that Florida Representative and India Caucus head Mike Waltz, he is going to be in the race to become the National Security Advisor. He's going to be one of the faces there that we are expecting to see as part of Donald Trump's key team. In fact, he is going to be expectedly the National Security Advisor. The buzz is that the Indian origin American Kash Patel, now that's also an interesting one. Kash Patel, is he going to become the Deputy CIA Director? Well, what we are picking up that the chances are very high for that. Then also there is chance of Marco Rubio. Now this is a very interesting name which has now come up, who has shown substantial support for enhancing ties with India and also someone who's known to be against China in several of the policy matters. He could possibly be picked as the US Secretary of State. Meanwhile, you have others such as Vivek Ramaswamy. Of course, he is going to be in the race to become the Education Secretary as well. So Vivek Ramaswamy, is he going to be the Education Secretary? We'll have to wait and see. Of course, there were others who were hoping in India, of course, that Vivek Ramaswamy may just become the Secretary of State. But well, so far that doesn't seem to be the way it's going. Meanwhile, let's also tell you a little bit about how some of the choices of these are pro-India and why they are possibly critics of China. Let's look, for example, at Mike Waltz. He's likely to be the NSA. Now, what is the stand that he's taken? He is already the head of India Caucus. That itself gives you an indication. When it comes to China, he's known for hawkish view on China as well. So that would mean it's an advantage for India. When it comes to him, he also is an advocate for strong India-US relations. And when it comes to China, Mike Waltz has called for the boycott of 2022 Winter Olympics as well for the United States in 2022. Let's look at some of the other names. Marco Rubio. This is going to be an interesting one if he is picked as the Secretary of State, as is being expected. He is very strongly in support of strong ties between US and India. He's always said that in the past. When it comes to China, he's called China a substantial threat to the interests of America. He's someone who has introduced a bill for closer military ties with India as well. When it comes to China, he supports restrictions on Huawei and he has actively pushed for it as part of the parliamentary panels that he has been part of. Then of course he's someone who has pushed for closer ties of military, and also let's get you some of the other names as well and what they could possibly mean. But before that, let's also tell you what ace investor Mark Mobius, well, he's also interestingly expressed faith in Prime Minister Modi. He said that he could become a very important peacemaker as the world goes through this time of turbulence. In fact, remember, this comes amidst the current West Asia conflict, the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war as well. Listen in to Mark Mobius and what he predicts about the way the world is going to be moving forward, and how you have Prime Minister Modi, he says, maybe playing a very critical role of peacemaker.
Internationally, I think will grow in importance going forward because he is able to have a dialogue with all sides of the political spectrum globally, and he could become a very important peacemaker. Definitely, I believe that there can be a lot of synergies with both people working together. Already there have been moves by both Russia and the Ukraine in this direction, and I believe Trump, you remember he said during his campaign that even before he became president, he would solve the Ukraine situation, or at least end the war. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but there already have been moves in that direction, and I think he's determined to make sure that war ends. I think my thinking is that he is really capable of almost anything.
Well, of course, we all know that there's massive bonhomie between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi. Does that augur really well for India, and is it going to be an advantage? Well, we are all going to be keeping our fingers crossed. Let me go across to the gentleman joining me on the show today. Sushant Sareen, a senior fellow of the ORF, is joining us. Vibhuti Jha is joining us, a former Republican candidate for New York Assembly. Well, Vibhuti Jha, I'm going to be coming to you first because of the names that I was just reading out, the kind of pro-India stance that we have taken. What do you think Trump 2.0 is going to mean for India as a nation and Indians within America? Do you think it is going to be actively pro-India and Indians, given the kind of statements which have come in the past, because Trump has been projected as someone who's anti-immigrants?
Thank you, Meghna, for having me here. I want to first caution. My caution is that let's not go too ecstatic about anything. You know, I'm a cautious guy. I'm a risk management guy. And I believe that let's not go hyperbole in terms of saying, oh, golden era has arrived. Let's be very careful, because political and diplomatic international compulsions play out differently at different points in time. And that's what is important. What is critical from my point of view is, I'm a Republican, and I've transitioned to being a Republican, traversing the path from being a Democrat, independent, and then Republican. So as the eyes opened, I have become a Republican, because I know one thing for sure. Living here for 40 years, I know Democrats have been single-handedly taken Indian community for granted. Every single anti-India, anti-Modi, UC, 370, 35A, every attack on India and Hindus have been conceived, originated, and manipulated in Democrat-run states. So people like me have been contentiously asking this question of the Indian community: what has the Democratic Party given you, other than being taken for granted? Your votes don't matter and your money doesn't count. And I have been saying this in the last cycle of this: make them both matter. And I'm glad that in 2024 it mattered. So all the names that have come about, they are positive names indeed. And I think I echo Jaishankarji's statement that other countries may have something to worry about. We don't have to worry about. But this is the caveat that I want to add here, is the fact that, hey, let's seize the moment. The Indian-US relationship has always been talked about in a strategic ally, natural partners, and all the brouhaha. I'm saying it's time to seize the moment, because you will not get these kind of scenarios again and again. Because likelihood, Trump is definitely pro-India. He has been very emphatic on principles, matters of principles. He's anti-terror. He's controlling regulating immigration. So there is a definite convergence on issues between Prime Minister Modi and Mr. Trump. The question is whether we are going to be dissipated on divergences and dissonances, or we would take advantage of convergence and opportunities. And that is where the maturity of this relationship will matter, in my opinion. People like us will definitely work towards that agenda. One of them would be that for the first ever time, the notorious USCIRF, which continues to issue statements against India and Hindus, must have an Indian Hindu there. Whether Indian American or wherever, you must have one such person in that organization.
That'll be interesting.
Yes, thank you.
That'll be very interesting to see USCIRF to have an Indian sitting there amongst the kind of statements which have happened. But Sushant Sareen, do you share
I want to make it very
cautious...
clear. An Indian Hindu, not
an Indian Hindu.
That's right.
Sushant Sareen, do you also share this cautious optimism, if I can call it, cautious optimism? Because, of course, we've seen Prime Minister Modi having collaborated, working very closely with three of the earlier presidents. Now, all three of them, and one of them is now going to return as in his second term, all of three of them have been very, very different. But many have said perhaps the points of convergence have been the highest when it comes to President Trump and Prime Minister Modi. Do you share that feeling as well, or do you think it is necessity, the point of my enemy's enemy is my friend, which is going to bring the two nations together, not really so much the leadership?
I think it's going to be a bit of both. It is going to be a convergence of interests, and of course, personalities do matter. But I'm very happy that Mr. Jha has given a bit of a reality check to everybody. Look, let's get a couple of things very straight.
Right.
The guys who are being appointed to the new Trump cabinet or the incoming Trump cabinet, they are not pro-India. They are pro-United States. They are American nationalists. They are American patriots first and foremost. And because they are that, they are also well disposed towards India because they see value in a partnership with India, which means that there is an opportunity for us to seize. They are not going to be hectoring us, moralizing, sermonizing us, not all of that, but there will be an element of transactionalism which is going to be there, which is always there in any relationship. So we need to be ready for that. There will have to be a give and take between us and them. Number two, a lot has been said about Trump is very erratic, he's irrational, he's unpredictable. Look, at one level he is unpredictable, but I think at another level you also have to see where he was in 2016 and where he is in 2024. I sense, and I might be completely wrong on this, but my own sense is that he is much more firmly footed this time around coming into office than what he was in 2016. Number two, he is much less erratic, much more consistent, and much more resolute, even mellow, in fact, to a point, than what he was in 2016. So all of this thing that, he's going to constantly have that hire and fire kind of thing, just look at the people who he's picking up in his administration. Each one of them, an expert in his own field, each one of them very highly regarded, at least the names that have come out so far, which is good for us because, if we already have established links with these people, unlike his previous administration where you had somebody like a Tillerson handling the State Department, you would not really, didn't have much of a contact with him, or many of the other appointees. This time, most of the people who are coming in to have a very good contact. But please remember that there will be issues on which there will be certain divergences. And it will be on both countries, as Mr. Jha very correctly said.
Which would be?
There will be divergences. And as Mr. Jha very correctly said, that, we will need to narrow down those divergences. There will be give and take. We will have to give in on certain things, maybe on some tariff issues. We can also talk to the Americans that our trade with the U.S. is not as imbalanced as the Chinese trade with the U.S. We have a relatively balanced trade. So there's a lot we can do with the United States in a close partnership with the United States and further deepen and strengthen this relationship than what it already is. So I think there are a lot of good things which we can look forward to. But let's not just sit back and say, okay, fine, we've got people in the U.S. administration who are well disposed towards India. Now everything will happen on its own. It's not going to happen on its own.
Absolutely. I think you made that very distinct distinction between them being pro-India or rather being pro-America. You said that they're going to work for the interests of their nation. But Vibhuti Jha, that is where we are hoping the points are going to be meeting. The fact that you have similar interests. One of that, of course, is that of China. America needs India to counter out China, the expansionist policies.
India also needs America. So
India needs America as well. Absolutely. India needs America. So when you...
United States.
I have always maintained in my shows and my conversations that the facetious argument that US needs India more than India needs US, we must stop that kind of a conversation. Because relativism is important. To what extent do I need one another? But let's acknowledge the fact that our journeys are the same, our mission is the same, and our objectives are the same. That's what I mean by saying if you focus on the convergences and opportunities, there are plenty of them to work on. And that's something
which are going to be the sticking points, Mr. Vibhuti Jha? Where do you think we may have divergent interests?
The divergence would be on the issue of Ukraine, for example. Mr. Prime Minister has very rightly, in my opinion, maintained a stoic position with reference to Ukraine. And my thought process is something which it may seem digression a bit, but Europe's contribution to world peace has been 2 world wars. They are very facile in making their problems look like the global problem. And if you look at the First World War and Second World War, they were European skirmishes for land grab or territorial expansions. They were not world wars. The colonial armies died fighting their local battles. So Ukraine, nobody bought it. Nobody bought it. So this was a very important issue. NATO will be an issue which Trump will have to address, because NATO is the only war club, if I may say so. Do we need a war club and imposition of the war club conditions on the rest of the world? Answer is no. So the world has definitely awakened to that fact. The third matter, the US attitude of sanctioning. I haven't always been against that. 3 years ago, I had said these sanctions and these impositions of moratorium on various countries suddenly announced will come back to haunt America. Because what if the globe begins to start sanctioning America for its own policies? And we are living in a remarkably interconnected world. See, I remember 1987 when I was in American Express in Jeevan Bharati building in Delhi. 1987 crash, we didn't even feel anything about it. But a Thai baht collapse, the Dow fell 500 points on a single day. So we are living in a remarkably interconnected world, interdependent world, where anything happening anywhere impacts instantly. So we have to be cognizant of that fact as well. So I would say that, we have tremendous amount of convergences and we must focus on that. And Ukraine is one, terrorism is another. That's a very important part. Trump's and Modi's agreement are about, one of the principal agreements is terrorism and calling terrorism as is. That's the most important convergence they have. And I think that will be the beginning point for the opening of a new innings in this partnership.
So, Sushant Sareen, I'm going to circle back to the Ukraine-Russia war, because a lot is riding on India as well for that. Do you see a policy shift perhaps coming in with the change of dispensation in US? After all, you have Trump, who's made it very clear that he is going to insist on some kind of a diplomatic solution. If you look at Marco Rubio, for example, if he becomes the US Secretary of State, he's someone who has very categorically said in the past as well that Ukraine should focus on diplomatic solutions with Russia rather than territorial recoveries. What are the indications coming in?
Look, so I think this is my point of slight disagreement with Mr. Jha. On the divergences, I don't think Ukraine is going to be a divergence between India and the United States. It was a divergence under the Biden administration. But I don't think under the...
I'm talking about that. If the State Department
I think that's what he...
pursue that. That's what I'm saying. I agree with you. That they are both in agreement on Ukraine.
So I personally think that the incoming administration is likely to be far more realistic on Ukraine. And frankly, when you look at the geostrategic cookies, Ukraine really doesn't count so much. The Russians have taken what they wanted to take. What is there left in Ukraine? Ukraine becomes a neutral country, learns to live with its laws. Just too bad. They're going to be saddled with debt. Just too bad. And that's the ugly reality of international relations. That the strong take what they can and the weak accept what they must. Whether we like it or not, that's the ugly reality. So I don't see much of a divergence. In fact, I would imagine that it will ease things between us and the United States some, because if the Americans are looking for some kind of a modus vivendi to engage with the Russians so that they don't go entirely in the Chinese camp, which I think even the Russians would not be wanting to do, it works well for us, because this is exactly what we've been telling the Americans.
Right.
Where I see a divergence is Iran, because I think the Trump administration is going to come down very hard on Iran. I don't know if there can be some kind of carve-outs for us when it comes to Iran, maybe on Chabad, maybe on a route to Central Asia and some kind of connectivity. But I think oil trade and all of that, they are going to come down like a ton of bricks. And frankly, when you stack up our relations with the US and some of its allies, and you stack it up with Iran, Iran really doesn't factor in much. So
absolutely.
that is going to be a bit of a divergence between us, also because we have very good relations with Israel. The third area is going to be China. On that, I think there are a lot of convergences, but then there will be a challenge for us to decide on how far we are going to go down the path of building on those convergences, from merely a partnership to something more than a partnership. To keep the Chinese at bay, to contain China. How far are we willing to go? What is going to be the level of cooperation? Does the Quad remain what it is right now? Does it scale up to something more than what it is? The other divergence is going to be on trade and tariff issues. And I think that is really going to be something where we can negotiate with the Americans. We might have to, we might have to give in some. And I think we should be ready to do it. We should have a game plan and a strategy ready. We should see what we can give in on, what we can seek from the Americans, where we can say that, okay, fine, give us an year, 2 years, where we, try and balance out certain things, how we can import certain things from the US without, harming ourselves, where it works for us.
So it's going to be transactional.
How we can have some kind of technology transfers so that we shift some manufacturing out here, so that we become part of a global supply chain where some manufacturers are being taken place in the United States, so that manufacturing returns to the US and manufacturing happens in India as well. So I think there are ways we can manage that, but we need to smarten up on it. If we sit back and, like some of our negotiators do, let's say no to everything, I'm not bothered, Hector, your trading partners, tell investors that I don't care if you bring in $2 billion, I don't care if you bring in $5 billion.
So it's time to build upon the bonhomie that we have seen visually in the optics, but also let's be cautiously optimistic, because this is at the end going to be transactional in nature as well. Yes, there are a lot of points of convergences, but it is the points of divergences that India must actively, diplomatically try to put its interests first as well. Well, thank you so much, Vibhuti Jha, for joining us, as well as Sushant Sareen. I think the two gentlemen have really put it all together very interestingly as to what Trump 2.0 means for India.